Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Camp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce, here for our March 31st weekly legislative update. This legislative update is at the end of the second legislative funnel for this year's session. And what that just means is that bills had to pass out of a Senate or House committee and then go across the aisle, across the chamber, across the rotunda to the House or the Senate, and pass a respective committee over there unless they're ways and means or appropriations or leadership bills. And that means obviously that a lot of policy bills did get killed so they can focus on budget and tax issues. So that's something we'll see here in the last month of session. They are targeted to adjourn on April 28th. That's the 110th day of session. That's when per diems run out. There doesn't seem to be a reason why they would stay past that. Really, the biggest things that they have to work on right now are the budgets. There's 10, 11 budget bills that they have to get through. And the good news is the House and the Senate are pretty close on their budget target numbers, which should make hopefully negotiations a little bit easier in that regard. But with regards to a few things that happened this week, we did see trucker liability reform, just like med-mal trucker liability reform was also an issue, a tort issue that the governor and some others wanted to see get done this year. So that did pass. That was an issue last session too. Didn't quite get over the threshold. It did now this year. What happened there is that there was a deal between the truckers and the trial lawyers, and the cap was up to $5 million from $2 million. So it went up quite a bit in that regard. But obviously, as we all know here in this community, transportation logistics is really important in the state of Iowa. So that's something that they wanted to see get done this session, and they did accomplish that this week. The carbon pipeline bill that the House passed, it did not make it through over in the Senate side. That doesn't mean that conversations with carbon capture and eminent domain are over. They're still ongoing. So that is something we may see come up here in the remainder of session. And as I said before, there's not a lot holding up session adjournment outside of those budget issues. With regards to property tax, obviously very large issue. We knew it was going to be a big issue that they were going to take a swing at here this year to try to do some reforms to. But it's tough to know if they'll actually accomplish anything this year. We knew from the start, and Senator Dawson had told us at many different forums, that it's going to be a multi-year issue. So they might not get much done, if anything, this year on it. But we do know in subsequent years, there's going to be a lot of conversation and work done on that. The good news is then obviously we can continue to have conversations about what that may look like if that is in fact the case. But another piece I wanted to touch on is, we hear a lot about, the fact that we're 40th in the Tax Foundation's property tax rankings. Just something to note on that after some folks that we work with have had some conversations with the folks out in DC on the methodology of that. The fact that we are eliminating the inheritance tax, when that's done, that will take us from 40th to 36th. So that right there has a factor in it. It's also the least specified model for their rankings. It's just anyone who knows anything about property tax knows it's extremely complicated. So there's a lot of different ways different states do it. So some of the things that Iowa has within its system make it make our rankings drop. So that's something that's also there that needs to be taken into consideration when having those conversations. But we do look forward to continuing to have conversations on that front. The great news the great thing being the chamber and, representing the business community, but also being a community voice, is we can really be that conduit between the public and private and state government sectors to really start those conversations and make sure we're trying to come up with the best policy possible. Obviously, several people did get their assessments this week. So that's something obviously that a lot of people, people in government, have been hearing about. But one thing to remember is we heard from the mayor this week during Leadership Council Bluffs Government Day is I'm not downplaying a 20% assessment in any way, shape, or form. But one thing to keep in mind is that we are in arrears 18 months. So that'll be the fall of 2024 that you will see those assessments coming into play. But the local governments obviously have a role in figuring out what they're going to do with their levy rates and things along those lines to see what percent increase you actually see in your tax bill. And it's likely, 3 to 5%. So again, not downplaying any of that, but I just think it's important, as the mayor noted this week at our Leadership Council Bluffs Day, that people kind of understand that first off, you're looking at that going into that first time that would be impacted, that assessment you just received would be fall of 2024. And based on what governments tend to do, it's usually a 3 to 5% increase. So please just keep that in mind as you do look at those assessments as well. With regards to the MEGA program, The Senate and the House have some differences on what they're looking at for taxes. And what I mean by that is the House has talked about, Senate has talked about elimination of the income tax system in the state of Iowa at some point. The House not so much interested in that. The House had some different proposals for property tax than the Senate has had. So there's just some different viewpoints on how tax issues need to be handled. Obviously, the MEGA program and tax credit programs based within Iowa Economic Development Authority have our tax implications. So one of the things that they're really looking at is, okay, how do we implement a program that may have tax implications when we're looking at doing tax reform, property tax reform in subsequent years, income tax reform with the Senate's interest and things along those lines. So how do we mesh those things together? But from our perspective, being that we have the biggest mega site, certified mega site in the state with Mid-American's rates in Mills County, that's something that's hugely impactful to our communities and to our area, Southwest Iowa in general. So that's something we're definitely advocating in favor of the mega bill. We've done that with people in the House and the Senate, our local representatives and others. And one of the biggest things that we keep talking about as well is you can't have this isolationist opinion. So, granted, we're very fortunate that we had some great partnerships with Mid-American and Mills County Economic Development and a litany of different people that came together to make this mega site possible down in Mills County. But the fact of the matter is, if you get $1 billion+ project in there, it's going to have statewide impacts. If it's in Mid-American territory, that impacts the rates and everything going forward, as far as, obviously with the load and things that they're going to be put on that. And then it's same thing with Alliant, if it goes into Alliant territory. So there's just things that need to be looked at big picture. And we can't be taking isolationist stance. Granted, again, like I said, we very much have a vested interest because we have the predominant site for this program. So we have a very much of an interest in it. Some other communities that may not necessarily apply to, sometimes you have to convince them a little bit of what's in it for me kind of concept. And I think it's really important to take that big picture perspective and make sure that you're thinking that these kinds of projects, $1 billion+, thousands of jobs, they have statewide impacts, and it's not very hard, or it doesn't take very long to see those coming through the state in other areas to really have the impact in your area as well, even if it is across the state that these things are occurring. So we'll continue to advocate in favor of that alongside Debbie Durham, our partners at Mid-American, and then the governor's also trying to figure out how to help and assist with that program as well. I already touched on the budget. The Senate and House budget targets are fairly close together, so that should hopefully help the biggest issue still remaining in the legislature, and that's the appropriations bills and setting the FY24 budget. But we didn't see, honestly, this week a lot of action for a funnel week. So that's something that leads you to believe that they're really going to dig into the appropriate bills and get moving for adjournment here in April. So with that, I will end this week's legislative update, same way I always do, just by thanking everyone for their investment, support, participation, and engagement with the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce. We're so thrilled that we get to provide the advocacy for the business community in the Southwest Iowa and Council Bluffs community. And we thank you for entrusting us to do that. Thank you and have a nice rest of the day.